It's our change episode. We'll talk about some of the effects of the new baseball rule changes, what we like and what we don't like, plus a detailed strategy discussion all about FAAB. What's the right amount to bid on a potential top 50 player? What's the right amount for a top 100 player? And so on and so forth. Columnist Joe Sheehan joins us on the Beat the Shift podcast, coming up next. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. My softball all rained out. It's been terrible this whole week. All my games rained out. New York has been it's been a mess here. How about you?
Same with me. My softball game on Sunday was rained out. My son's game was rained out, but hopefully nice weather's coming. And listen, the weather's affecting the games, the Major League Baseball games also. I mean, the Mets were rained out like 4 out of 5 games or something like that.
Yeah, here we go again with the story. Mets looked pretty bad against Detroit. Verlander and Scherzer made their it wasn't triumphant return to Detroit, and Mets just got swept by the Tigers. Yes, this is true and very heartbreaking, but that's baseball. Hopefully, we'll come with a nice run coming soon.
Right, but it's only May. It's only May 4th. May the 4th be with you. That's when we're taping this, and hopefully everything will turn around from here.
Sounds good to me. All right, well, we've got a great show today, and we're calling it our Changes episode, and we've got a fantastic person to talk all about some rule changes, about FAAB and whatnot. He's Joe Sheehan from the Joe Sheehan newsletter. Welcome to the show, Joe. How are you?
Good, Ariel. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on here, Ruvain.
Well, appreciate you being on here. I was going to say, I met you for the first time just about 2 months ago at Tout Wars, and I come up to you and, hey, hi, Joe, I'm Ariel Cohen. How you doing? And the first thing you said, oh, you're a legend. I'm like, no, Joe, you're the legend.
Well, I've actually heard Ian Khan do an impersonation of you more than I've heard your own voice, or at least I had until recently. So that's where the legend comes from. But no, it's great to come on. I've been listening to the pod. It's great stuff. I think because I've gotten back into the industry leagues, I'm consuming a lot more fantasy pods out there, and it's such a fun way to come at the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff. It's the golden age of fantasy baseball podcasts and articles and everything. It's hard to sneak by any player these days because everybody reads everything and listens to everything, and such good content out there. And hopefully we'll provide some good stuff today. So we get right into it on the show here. And just wanted to get your general take right now on the whole baseball with the rule changes. And Joe, what do you think so far has been the biggest rule change, or let's say it this way, which MLB rule change has had the largest effect so far?
Well, I'm sitting here at 9:00 on a Thursday night, and there's no baseball to watch. So I'm going to say it's the pitch clock. There's no question that it's done what baseball wanted it to do. Yeah, I think pace became kind of the watchword for length, and it certainly shortened the games by about a half hour. Certainly changed fan behavior. You can't get there in the second inning anymore and expect to hang out for 3 hours. This has been very widely positively received, certainly by the media covering the game with the shorter nights. And you really notice it, when you're at the game. There's less time to BS between pitches. Certainly there's still not as much action as you'd like. Strikeout rates are still high. Walk rates are still high. You don't really have the ball and play game that we used to have in the 80s, but it has shortened the game. I think that's by and large the biggest effect.
Yeah, I agree. Ruvain, do you disagree at all?
I think the best change and the biggest change is the non-throw over to first base by pitchers. That has changed the fact of how stolen bases are. We're going back, like you said, to the 80s, where stolen bases are much more prevalent, and it's giving baseball a different aspect, meaning you have the pitch clock, it speeds everything up, but if you have a runner on first, you have to watch the pitch clock, you have to watch the guy on first, and there's more stealing, there's more running because there are less throws over. Stolen bases are up, it means offense is up, and I think that's good overall for baseball. That's the best thing that can happen, because baseball had the lockout earlier at the beginning of last year. What was the only thing that helped get baseball back on track, and that was when they had the home run contest basically between Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. Offense brought fans back, and that was the idea behind this, to try to get offense going again.
Ruvain, that's a great point. If you go look at throughout baseball history, attendance and interest has gone almost in a direct line with offensive levels. There was a downturn in the 1960s. That's when they lowered the mound, they shortened the strike zone. We had a dead period of offense in the 1980s that fans turned away from the game. And then, as you say, after the 94 strike, offense went up, interest went up. That's pretty much throughout baseball history. You can draw a straight line or a relationship between run scoring and the success of the game.
Absolutely. And Joe, what rule changes that they've have implemented so far, maybe that you like more than others, or maybe is there a rule change that you dislike and you wish they hadn't done it or done it differently?
Yeah, I have no use for the shift ban, for telling teams where they can play or not play their defenders. It was there's a balance between the game throughout history, and this to me was just something that you had to expect offenses to counter. Okay, we're going to put 3 guys over here. You can hit it to our defenders, or you can hit it the other way, but it's up to you. And MLB kind of came in and put their thumb on the scale and saying, well, no, you can't put your defenders where you think the ball is going to be hit. I think it's an utterly ridiculous rule philosophically. It also doesn't get what they want. MLB, and let's face it, guys, this was a rule that was put in because people just didn't like the way it looked. Boomers didn't like the way it looked with the extra infielder in short right field. But it also wasn't going to change behavior. Under the shift, if a hitter wanted to spray the ball, he had think about left-handed hitters up. There's one guy standing between second and third base. Hit it that way. But hitters weren't doing that. Well, they're not going to do it now, when defenses are saying, well, that line drive to right field, that's going to be a hit now. So MLB, by banning the shift, is providing an incentive for these hitters to hit the exact same way they're always hitting. If you look at the numbers in the early going, hitters are pulling the ball as much as they did last year. They're hitting fly balls as much as they did last year. They're striking out as much as they did last year. So this is essentially a subsidy for the type of hitting that baseball was nominally trying to get out of the game.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, certain hitters who are going to pull are just going to pull no matter where you put the fielders. And we had Vinny Pasquantino on the show before the season, and he said, listen, I ain't that fast. So the difference between a single, me getting on first doesn't do much, right? We want me to go and hit a double. We want me to go hit a homer. So you can ban the shift. I'm not going to bunt down the third base line. I'm not going to do that. So for guys like him, I guess it helps. But for the others who want to spray it to change it, yeah, it might have the opposite effect.
Right, you've got 2 guys on the left side of the infield now instead of 1 where there was last year. So it's kind of that's been a frustrating thing for me, trying to get this through to MLB, that this change that you're making is both philosophically wrong and it's not going to get you the results you want. Other than that, I think it's fine.
Ruvain, any changes that you dislike?
Yeah, I hate the ghost runner. I don't like that 10th inning ghost runner. If they want to do it, let's say in the 14th or 15th inning because they're scared of the pitcher's getting hurt, that's fine. But to put a runner on second without having him to earn that spot, not only that, the runner who's on second was the one who made the last out in the 9th inning. So why would he deserve to go on second base? I just don't like it. I think you have to, baseball, you have to walk. You have to get a hit. You have to find a way to get on base. You have to earn your way on. Putting a guy on second, they did that in because of COVID. They wanted the games to end quicker. I understand that. But now if the games are going quicker and they're half hour quicker, there's no need for that ghost runner because the games are going to finish early anyway.
I did realize if we're considering that, because I think of that as a rule that came in 2020, that's one of the worst rules in baseball history. I'm completely with you, Ruvain. It's a rule designed to get games over with. It's a thing you do in a youth tournament when you've got to play 5 games a day on the same field. Or in softball tournaments, I know I've used it as well. To do it in Major League Baseball where the games count is a joke.
Well, they made it official for this year. Before it was just temporary. Now they made it official. That's why I counted it as a rule.
You're right.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with if the pitch clock came first, they probably would not have had this rule. Like I think the order of operations because of COVID and they did it whatever it was, it wouldn't have happened had they tried the pitch clock first. So it's maybe they'll take it out. You never know. And yes, I do agree. I mean, in general, I dislike less games. I mean, I know the games are quicker. That's great, but if I go to a ball game, I'm paying for a ticket. I want to get the most enjoyment out of it. I don't mind if it's a 3.5 hour game. I'd rather a 3.5 hour game than a 2.5 hour game. It's less time to talk to my friends. It's less time for me to veg out. It's a service cut. I remember when the doubleheaders during the post-COVID year was 7 innings, and I'm like, I'm getting 14 innings of baseball instead of 18. I'm getting gypped here. So I see it as the other way. And the other thing I'd say is that, and I know Glenn Colton talks about this, and we'll actually have Glenn Colton on shortly on this show, that, you know what, in the 9th inning, maybe don't have the pitch clock because, there's drama, and part of the baseball is the buildup, right? Oh, you get the single. Oh, it's now bases loaded, and there's drama in it. And when you rush the pitch because of a pitch clock and don't let the drama play out, some of the best moments are when you just see the pitcher waiting or not, and then you anticipate the buildup. You don't want to get rid of that completely. So I'd be fine if they tinkered the rules to say, maybe in the 9th inning don't do it, or maybe with the bases loaded, let's make it a longer pitch clock, or just some modifications to let drama build organically.
I think we're going to feel this as the games get more important later in the year with pennant races and playoff races, and as you say, in the postseason. I don't know yet how it's going to feel when these very tense moments. The only one we've seen, obviously since then, was a Trout and Ohtani in the World Baseball Classic, and of course that didn't have a pitch clock. That was old style, everybody kind of taking a breath baseball. So I'm very curious how these tense, important moments are going to feel. Or, say a pitcher's going for a perfect game or a no-hitter in the 9th inning. How is that going to feel now versus the way we used to experience that?
And Ariel, how much money did Kenley Jansen pay you to say that? Because I think he probably put you up for that because I think Juan Soto would benefit from a non-pitch clock. There's some certain players that would benefit from a non-pitch clock. It doesn't matter what inning it is, but especially the 9th inning, I agree. The 9th inning, that's when you have everything going around. That's when the most stress, and people are. It's like waiting in line for a roller coaster. It's going to happen, and then it's over in 2 minutes or 2 seconds, just like the pitch or the 9th inning. It's something that you shouldn't have to rush.
And before we get on to more fantasy strategy, just want to mention one thing, Joe, get your take on it. Home runs are up this year. They're actually back to roughly the 2021 level, instead of where they were last year. Do you think that has anything to do with the ball, or do you think that the ball has now gotten more consistent? Because I've heard reports that pitchers are liking the ball this year better. What's up with the ball? Do you have any take on it?
It does. The distribution early on. Now, you can actually look this up if you go to Baseball Savant. They actually publish the drag on the baseball. And if you look at the spread early on, the first week or so, we were playing with some very live balls, it felt like. The balls flying out everywhere, a lot of opposite field home runs. It's mellowed out since, and the distribution looks a bit like it did in 2021, which was a pretty average year for power, maybe a little bit ahead. My thing is, though, I don't think this is intentional. I think baseball has, to some extent, lost control of their process. So it's a guessing game each year what the baseball is going to be. They need to get a better hold on the process as opposed to just kind of, hey, well, this is what it's going to be. There has been some wonderful research done by Bradford William Davis, by Dr. Meredith Wells, kind of looking at the baseballs and seeing, well, okay, some of the balls were like this and some of the balls are like this. And apparently, the Yankee game balls last year were like super balls that we used to play with growing up. So some great research there. You can look that up on Insider, Bradford William Davis and Dr. Meredith Wells. I'm looking forward to their research this year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same here. And they do excellent stuff. Let's talk a little bit fantasy strategy. And just to set up the conversation, I know we've asked this to people before, but it's always good to get a fresh take on it. Doing well in fantasy baseball has to do with a lot of things. Luck, of course, is a big part of it, but in terms of influence by you playing the game, it's about knowing the players. It's also about properly valuing them, knowing how much to bid before the season in an auction, or what round to take them, how much to bid on them in FAAB, the timing of it. But it's also about knowing all the players, knowing who are the next prospects coming up, who are the guys who are due for a good year, things like that. Do you think, and of course it's all both, but do you think that it is more important to know the players, or is it more important about the mathematics of how you do value them and play the numbers correctly?
Well, I like to think I'm pretty good at knowing the players, and my track record in fantasy is terrible. So I'm going to say it's more important to value them correctly. I look at, I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but I look at the hardcore math where this game has gone in the last 25 years. Just these brilliant guys and girls coming in and doing that hardcore analysis, standings, gains, points, and things like that. And then even beyond that, on the player analysis side, the things that are being done with StatCast. But I think that the valuation is the missing piece, certainly for me. And I kind of envy the people who can kind of get in on the numbers and say, okay, this is the number of marginal RBI I'm going to need. This is the number of saves that are left in the pool for me to take in the 12th round. I'm incredibly I admire the people that have that math of it. For me, when I sit at the draft table, I'm trying to look at it as a baseball project more, which is I'm trying to find the guys who are going to have the best years. And figuring that if I take the guys who have the best years, it all will work out in the standings.
Ruvain, do you agree with that? And I'll add to the question for you. Do you think the answer changes preseason versus during the season?
It definitely changes from preseason to during the season. During the season, the pool of players that you have to actually acquire, whether it's on FAAB or whether through trade, shrinks considerably. So the value of those players, depending on your situation, the values of those players go up and down. But you have to know the values of them. You have to know the values in general and to your team, because during the course of the season, the value of a player who steals, if you have a lot of stolen bases, his value is very low. If you need saves and there's a closer out there, a closer available, his value may be low relative to the rest of the market, but for you, it's worth more. Or same thing with a starting pitcher. So I think the idea of whether you have to know the players or value the players properly, I think it's a combination of both, because you have to know what you're getting out of each player, and you have to know your team construct and what your team values more at certain points of the season.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I think that the valuing is really the piece, and I'm not going to say that it's more important, but let's just say that it's highly undervalued. That, you know, I feel like if I went into a draft and I had just the steamer projections, right? You know, forget about ATC. Just, you know, give me somebody's projections that's competent and that's, you know, been successful. I know how to value that. I know how to come up with some numbers, and I know how to put together the right roster to do that. It's the mathematical construct, I think, that gets it. Whether I know the players or not, I mean, I go to fantasy football leagues, and I do fairly well. I don't really follow football that well. I follow my Giants, you know. I know some of the top players around the league, sure, but I don't follow it as deeply as I do baseball. Yet I do fine, because I just follow the same kind of guidelines of math and valuing. So the reason I brought this up is I want to talk about FAAB. We always talk on the show a lot about the preseason and the dollars, but the truth is that it has to do a lot about FAAB during the season, right? You got to bid on him. Most leagues that I play in, unless you play in a pick them up whenever you want, there's some, you know, waiver wire FAAB bidding, or you have to blindly bid or auction or whatever it is to get your players. So first question to you, Joe, on the FAAB is, you know, obviously each and every team specific situation is the key driver. If you're, you know, you need power on your team, sure, you're going to obviously be bidding more on power. If you have a lot of injuries, you might need to spend more. You know, your team specific situation is the key. But in general, just in a vacuum or so, do you think that FAAB bidding is more about coming up with the right math number on a return on investment basis to say, well, a guy of this caliber is, you know, worth X in FAAB, and that's what I need to bid? Or is it more market driven? We know the market's going to pay over this. I got to get that player. We got a game theory to find out what I have to bid and bid it and bid a little bit more and play the market. So I'm asking, is it a return on investment math deal, or is it more play the market and pay market prices?
For me, it's more return on investment. I want to make sure that when I make my FAAB bid, I've mapped it out so that I've spent the exact amount of money, per hopefully $1 more than the second place guy, to get the player I want for the production he's going to give me. You talk about, you know, the market. One of the things I think is hard to do is figure out the market value of the player to everybody else in your league, because there's somebody out there who drafted DeGrom, Rodon, and Woodruff and is tearing his hair out right now and will bid anything for Gavin Williams or Gavin Stone or Tanner Bybee. And I don't think I'm good enough to do the math for all 11 or 14 other teams in my league to figure out what this particular player is going to mean to them. As Ravane pointed out, this is a dynamic thing as the year goes on. Sitting at the draft table, everybody's kind of trying to do the same thing. Once we're into FAAB, everybody's trying to do something different in every single week with every single bid they make. So my feeling is all I can do is try to make sure I'm spending my money and getting the statistics for them.
Yeah, totally. It's very different than preseason, exactly for the reasons you said. But of course, we still have to do it. So I even though it's more complicated, I think this question does pose thought. Ravane, any thoughts on whether FAAB is more about playing the market or generating a good return on investment per dollar FAAB?
Yeah, I think it's return on investment to a point, because if your team is desperate, if your team is in 10th place or 8th place and you want to try to make that jump, yes, you can do mathematics and make sure you figure out exactly how much you have to pay for a certain person to get return on investment, but that may not get the person that you need. So yes, you should be conscious about that, but if you need something, sometimes the need trumps the math, and you just have to go out and do it. Sometimes you need to just, as they say, splurge on it and just do what you have to do. So yes, it is return on investment to a point, but there gets up to a point where if you're doing return on investment and it's not working, and it's June, you're falling behind, it's July, you're falling behind, you're going to have all that extra FAAB at the end of the season, and you're waiting to spend it, and you're spending it conscientiously. But at that point, you're spending it conscientiously on what? You're already out of it. So sometimes you do have to pay the market value.
So Rob Silver, friend of the show, he put a couple of questions out on Twitter, and to read off two tweets that he wrote. One question what he had was, if Tanner Bybee is the SP60 rest of the season, so he values to whatever that is for the rest of the season, was he worth the cost in FAAB? Bybee went anywhere between $200 and $500 in the main event. Like the min bid was $200, the max bid was $500. And the other question he asks is, he says, it's interesting to me that as smart as we are, nobody in fantasy has a really good methodical, objective answer to what an SP60 is worth in FAAB. We're all sort of guessing, or at least if somebody has that answer, they aren't sharing it. Because I know everybody has shown how to value people preseason, but I agree with him. I haven't seen people really think about, if the guy evaluates to a top 3 outfielder, then he is worth what in FAAB. Like, we haven't seen that. So I thought we could talk about that today and get, maybe a consensus or just some thought process for everybody in terms of how to tackle this question. I thought that was a good question. But before that, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
So I'm going to wrap this trivia around exactly what you just said. I'm going to name off the statistics for 2 pitchers. I'm not going to give the names. And I'm going to give you the option of either taking pitcher A, who is the current SP59, pitcher B, current pitcher SP60, or Tanner Bybee. That's your choice, okay? So option A is Tanner Bybee. Option 2, SP59, has pitched 41 innings, has 27 strikeouts, an ERA of 4.61 and a whip of 1.34 with 4 wins. SP60 is 42 innings, 2-2 record with 33 strikeouts and 42 innings, a 4.64 ERA and a 1.12 whip. So, Joe, who would you rather have? The SP59, the SP60, or Tanner Bybee?
With the caveat, this is the only information I have. I'll take Tanner Bybee.
That's the only information, going on the fact that we're trying to figure out whether or not Tanner Bybee is worth an SP60 slot.
Tanner Bybee.
Okay, Ariel?
Yeah, I guess I'd take Tanner Bybee for the same reason. I mean, I'm trying to think of who even those guys are, but I can't even think of who they are.
So the first one, the SP59, is Kyle Gibson. So yes, I think you'd rather run Tanner Bybee than Kyle Gibson because of the upside. I get that. But the current SP60 is Aaron Nola. Put your head around that a little bit. So right now, the current SP, I know he wasn't valued that during the draft. I understand that, but he's currently the SP60. Is he worth the value going the rest of the season? Who would you rather have, the SP60? Pay for the Tanner Bybee? Would you rather have the Kyle Gibson? Joe, do you think Tanner Bybee is worth an SP60 current price?
I'll still say yes. I'll also say that this is a good argument for not evaluating pitchers based on 40 innings, based on Kyle Gibson and Aaron Nola having the same stats. But I would still take Bybee over those 2 stat lines.
Okay, so Bybee again went from $200 to $500 of FAAB in the NFBC, which is anywhere from 20 to 50% of your entire budget for the entire season. I mean, is that too much? At what point do you think that makes no sense?
Well, I want to focus on a word that Rob used here. Rob's a wonderful analyst, and he hit the right word, which is objective. And this is where I get to in March, in February, in November. I think we can get to objective answers about the value of certain draft positions, about certain auction values. But once you're in the season, now you're talking about what does my team need, and in a again, 12-team league, 15-team league, that's going to be a different question for everybody. This range, 20 to 50%, almost certainly has, I won't say it has nothing to do with Tanner Bybee. I think we could all sit around a table and come to some consensus about what Tanner Bybee will do the rest of the year. What we don't know is, this guy has 8 pitching points. This guy has 48 pitching points. And the difference in those roster constructions is what's driving these price differentials. It's not Bybee, it's what does my team need on May 1st?
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's two separate questions. It's what is Bybee going to do rest of the season, which, according to ATC rest of season projections, 4.48 ERA, 1.34 WHIP. ATC right now is going off of the Fangraphs depth charts. Innings pitched, and I guess there's a lot of mix about him being a reliever, so we only have 58 innings. That sounds low. Some other projections, 82 innings, roughly the same ERA, maybe a little bit lower, and they evaluate to about a $2 pitcher for, full season, rest of season. Okay, I mean, you can come up with and say, listen, he's a $10 player. You can come up with whatever objective objective measure you have in terms of a projected value, but the question, of course, is, given that, what's it worth it to you in FAAB? Now, yes, obviously it depends if you're missing DeGrom and you're missing all those pitchers. Obviously, your demand for that position is going to be greater, sure. But can we come up with some kind of thing in a vacuum where we say he's worth X? Starting at the top, Joe, in terms of let's say a player would generate a top 50. Rest of season value. So he's just going to be one of the top 50 players. What would be the appropriate FAAB percentage of your budget to bid so that you'll have a return on investment for that? It's going to be very high, obviously.
Yeah, I would basically do it from how much do I want to be sure I have for the rest of the season? So just to throw numbers at it, if I still have $1,000 FAAB, I want to make sure I can make these $1 pickups every week for the next 21 weeks. So I'd probably want to keep like $40 back. So I'd go as high as $960 for a guy that you could tell me was going to be a top 50 player. I would not hesitate to blow out most of my FAAB in that case.
So 96% of your budget should go for one top 50 player?
Yeah, that's what I would do, because you just can't buy value like that. I'd also make the point that your FAAB dollars lose 4% a week. The first week of the year, you're buying 100%. You're 26 weeks. The next week, you're buying 25 weeks. The next week, you're buying 24 weeks. I have no issues blowing out 96% of my remaining FAAB budget, especially at this point in the year.
Does that matter what type of league you're playing in, whether it's a mixed or mono for you, or it's the same general concept?
It depends on a lot of things. The two main leagues I play in are mixed labor, which is $100 FAAB. You can't trade for FAAB, trade FAAB, and you have to have $1 bids. That changes the math versus, say, a AL Tout, which has $1,000 FAAB, and you can trade for FAAB, and you can make $0 bids. So there's a lot of different things happening there. But I certainly am more conservative in the $100 league. Doesn't have the gradations of FAAB that you have in the 1,000, and because I can't acquire it during the year. But in a NFBC model, I'm perfectly happy blowing it out and taking my chances. I believe that I can find dollar players throughout the rest of the year in a way that I can't find a superstar.
Interesting. Ruvain, would you go all the way to 96% on what you perceive to be a top 50 player?
I don't think so, because those top 50 players, there is a possibility. You're saying one player. Based on the numbers you just said, there are 200 players who actually earn some value. They're not going to be the top value, but you named a couple that have some pretty good value there. So I think I'd probably go more like 15 or 20% of the total FAAB, just because there are injuries. I want to have enough money that I want to get the injury plugs that I need later in the season. There are other guys who are going to come up. I want to make sure I have that. I want to have the hammer toward the end of the season. I want to make sure I get those 2-star pitchers that I want. So I have to, if you're going to go after a top 50 player, yes, you can spend. I think you can spend 150, maybe $200, but beyond that, I think you have to rein it back just a little bit because otherwise you're gonna strap yourself for cash later on because you're not gonna have the money to fill the slots and you end up getting bottom of the barrel guys. And yes, you're getting that top 50 guy, but the guy you're replacing later on has a negative value, and that goes against the whole process.
Yeah, I think that I would want to hold 30 to 40% at a minimum for a whole season. Obviously, it depends where you are in the season, how badly your team is doing. But in a vacuum, from the start, I want to hold 30 to 40%, and then I'd say I'd spend roughly half of that on that top 50 player. So I'd probably put down. We're talking 300 to 400 FAAB, so 30 to 40% on a top 50 player. The math in my analysis showed it's about a $300 bid. I think I would spend a drop more because then I would deduct, as Joe would do, deduct from what you need for the week to week. But I don't think I would go to 96. I don't think I'm confident that 4% I could work with.
Top 50 players don't come into the player pool at midseason very often. Think about maybe who the last one might have been. I don't think anybody thought Michael Harris was going to necessarily have that kind of value. Think about Juan Soto coming up in May a couple of years back. If I tell you that it's going to be, if Juan Soto suddenly shows up on your free agent pool, you would hold back to, say $350, or even, it sounds like Ruvain wouldn't even go that high, as opposed to, throwing it all out there to get a true superstar player for the next 21 weeks.
Yeah, so
I think there's an abstraction we're talking about here, but hey, here's a legitimate guy you would have taken in the 4th round 2 months ago. Are you really going to tap the brakes?
It's also a lotto ticket, though, because you don't know which of these guys are going to hit. So
You're right.
even if you spend the money on them, it may be a complete waste, and they may blow out their knee a week later, or for pitchers, they may end up having a pitch limit and some inning limit, something like that. So if you're doing it that way, it doesn't make you want to spend your money wisely, and sometimes if there is no guarantee. The only two things you can guarantee are taxes and death. Besides that, you can't guarantee that the $200, $300, or $700 you're going to spend in FAAB is going to be the next Juan Soto.
Well, to hell with you. I'm going to live forever, man. So not that crap up. But sure, no, I think it's an interesting discussion when you actually put names on it too. To say the stat line is one thing, but you think about the way Harris came up. Harris was a league winner last year.
Oh, sure. But I think it's a little bit different if somebody dropped by accident Freddie Freeman the first week of the season, and Freddie Freeman's available. Well, Freddie Freeman is a known commodity for years and years. I think that's very different than betting on a rookie or somebody. Michael Harris, you don't know he's going to be great. Juan Soto, you didn't know. Maybe you assumed, but for every one of those two, there's how many that are busts, right? It's not a guarantee. It's a projection, right? And there's how often do you really see a projected top 50 player?
In fairness, everything we do is projection, right? And
sure,
I think and talk about guys blowing. Freddie Freeman can blow his knee out. I mean, we could do this all day, but I personally would be a lot more aggressive with that caliber of player because that's a league winner. And I get that. Man, Ruvain, I love being in an auction and having that extra $20 at the end where I can make sure I get my guys, where I can have the hammer. In FAAB, though, I worry less about that and more just let me get this potential superstar to try to win my league.
Okay, I mean that does work, but if you do need those two-star pitchers, those two-star pitchers are very expensive in the end, and that helps you in multiple categories. It helps you in wins, strikeouts. It may hinder you in the ratio stats, but those things, people are always looking for two-star pitchers in August and September, and if you don't have that extra $100 for August and September to buy those two-star pitchers, your pitching is going to suffer but you may have a great hitter. That's great. But in order to win your league or to place in your league, sometimes you need a mix of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think the argument here is not for pushing a lot of what you want for the superstar player. I think it's more for you, I guess, about the split between what you think you could hold for the rest of the season to make the little lineup adjustments that you need. So you're basically saying, all right, you're good with 4% of your budget for the rest of the way for just everything, and push all the chips you have left. If I'm holding 30 to 40%, and I said, all right, I'll spend a little bit over half that. All right, so it's a half versus all is the difference between us.
With the context of that money is losing value every week.
Right. What about a top 100 player in terms of what you would do FAAB? So you would do 96% for a top 50. How much does that decrease for top 100 roughly?
It drops off considerably because I think once you're kind of going down the pyramid here, you are, as Reve would point out, taking on more risk with each level down. There's also a better chance that the player that you're targeting, you can replace those statistics more likely is because he's not quite as good a player. So I think at that point, I'm taking a big step back and dropping into the 20%, if you will, of my budget, as opposed to, it's not a linear thing for me. It's very much, what would the word be? Um, uh, uh, I'm sorry, guys. I'm old. Exponential, logarithmic. Those are the words. See, these are the words I used to know when I was 22, and now I'm old. I don't remember them anymore. But it's definitely not a linear function for me. I'm pulling all the way back into the 20% range for guys like that.
The other argument about not spending like 96% is that, if you're talking about the return on investment argument where, for every FAAB dollar I want to earn $2 of FAAB value, if you're spending 96%, the chances of earning a return really, really drop. And you're better off partitioning your sure, you can buy that guy, but are you better off buying $200-$300 players, right? Because you can earn a better return, or you can have a better chance at a return if you split it into lower segments. So I don't know if that flies from a return on investment argument. Obviously it's player specific, but I that's why I hesitate to spend that much on a top 100 player. I think I'm with you. I think that somewhere around 20% is right because you can still earn a return on that, and yet you still have plenty of room to spend on else.
I guess where I would differ only is to say that I'm not trying to win the ROI war. I'm trying to win the league. So at the end of the year,
you do that by winning the ROI award.
I don't know that applies to FAAB. I think in FAAB you got to get the maximum statistics, and if you're more likely to do that buying a star. I understand the argument. I completely get it, but for me, I'm more confident that I can take the dregs of my FAAB and get value than I can necessarily do it with kind of spreading out the risk. If you think about it from a gambling standpoint, or just flip a coin or whatever, are you more likely to win 3 straight bets or 1? You're more likely to win. You're basically trying to say you want to parlay 3 $200 FAAB bets, and I'm saying you're better off making 1 $600 bet.
And I would actually even cut that in half. I'm not even spending 20%. I'm going to spend close to maybe 10%, 8 to 10%, because those top 100 guys, those sometimes are not the guys that are the top rookies. Sometimes the guys that sneak through. Sometimes you're able to get these guys really early, really quick. Like Spencer Strider, a lot of people picked him up last year because he was a very good reliever. People didn't spend that much money because he wasn't the closer, so people didn't spend that much money. But he ended up returning on investment so much, and you don't have to spend that $200 sometimes to get that top 100 player.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Get Spencer Strider for for 0.8% of your budget is necessarily an actionable plan every year.
No, 8%. Well, listen, it last year, how many people had Spencer Strider early on? A lot. I know I had him very early on because I thought it was a good reliever. So
right.
I was looking for middle relievers. So I only spent I got him the second week of the season. I got him for $20, and that's right there. That's the return on investment that you're looking for. But
right.
You could still get these guys if you get them early enough. If you know when to jump in. If these guys are playing but they're not really producing yet, but you think that you see they had the pedigree in the minors, and you think they're going to do it and they're available, then you should go after them with a decent amount. I wouldn't say blow your budget out like a top 50 player, but I think you could spend some of the money there and still be able to save money for later.
I guess what I'm saying, I don't know that I thought the question was, a projected top 100 player. I don't think Strider was that last year. He turned out to be, obviously. But in the context of the question, it was, a projected top 100 player, what would you pay for him in FAAB? At the time you FAAB Strider, I don't think even the most optimistic projection had him going that high. You did a great job of finding one of these other categories talking about here, like a regular pitcher, and getting the ROI on that. And I think that's, in season, that's where all of the value lay. I mean, we're talking about top 50, top 100 players. We can disagree on what to bid on those. But the league, I think the league winner is if you get Michael Harris for $96. But the other league winners are when you get Spencer Strider for $80.
Yeah, No, definitely. And if you look at the successful guys in the NFBC, I don't think they're spending $200-300 on players. I think they're doing it by doing the 20 and 30 and the 10 and the 1 and the 2, and occasionally the 50 and 60 and 70 when they need it. They're really maximizing ROI. That's why I just think that anything over a certain amount is prohibitive. It's like, for example, I'll give you an example from the draft. Let's say you do your valuations, and let's say let's call it Garrett Cole is the best pitcher, right? And you value him at $40. The problem is, let me go further. Let's say you value him at $50. Just that good, he's $50. Problem is when you have a $260 budget, even though if he's available at $45 and your value say $50, the sheer dollar amount is very prohibitive, because then it gives you one less roster space, and the rest of the money left for you, you can't slice it up enough to get some of the value. So even though the one player might be the right call, it just is prohibitive for the rest of your roster. And that's sort of my argument on why just spending that much on one player, even if it's the right guy, it could be the right call for that one person, but you might be able to get a better aggregate value from other buys later on without spending that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and somewhere Rick Wolf just yelled 51. I don't know if you guys can hear him. But no, I think I think one of the things you can do in NFBC, you play enough leagues, is you can actually try out different strategies in each league. So when I'm going to be the crazy FAAB bidder in this league, and over here I'm going to do the more sane, sober, not Joe Sheehan strategy. So I think there's live experiments that go on every year. But I think it's an interesting. I think there's a phrase I use, guys. The question is more interesting than the answer. I think we may be at that. I think we may be at this point here with this.
Oh, yes, yeah. I'm just fascinated by this question because it's not really talked about that much, and this is a game theory part of the FAAB that really is what wins leagues, so really needs to be thought out more. And hopefully you, the listener who's listening to this, really walks away with something interesting. And I don't think we came to a conclusion. I think we just shared a lot of different points and reasons, which is exactly what we want to do to stir thought. So
because there's no one right answer. I think it's a combination of everything and playing it correctly. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's do some waiver wire here, and could be a big week. A lot of waiver wire guys available. Joe, you're the guest. I'll let you go first. Who are a couple of guys who you might want to pick up in your leagues this week?
Yeah, I will say that I skipped over a lot of the big names. I was looking down this list for, as Rufane put it, some of the $80 players you might be getting, or even less than that. A lot of leagues. I'm not sure if Nick Gordon's been dropped in a lot of leagues. I've held him in the league I have him in. But this is somebody who came into the year, potential 15-15 guy. The playing time was a little bit in question, and he's hitting very bad luck in April. He has very good contact numbers, expected batting average, expected slugging. He's got a really good strikeout rate. He's making a lot of contact, but he was hitting into bad luck. Over the last week, picked up a couple extra base hits. He's hit for a high average. It looked for a second like his playing time was in trouble. That looks like it's going to be all right, too. I think he's somebody who dropped a lot of value in April, is probably out there in most leagues, and can actually help you. I think he's still got that 15-15 potential.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Guy who a lot of people are high on, and depending upon your league size, that's fantastic. Ruvane, any for you?
Yeah, I got a couple, and I'm gonna do relievers here and a couple on one bench guy. First of all, Brusdar Graterol. He's available. He's only taken in 37% of CBS leagues so far. He's getting almost as many save opportunities as Evan Phillips, and he's getting a lot of wins because he's pitching in high leverage situations. His ERA and WHIP are great, so he's a perfect guy to have on your roster. If you don't like throwing a starting pitcher, you can put him out there. You may get a vulture save. You may get a win. Another reliever, Michael King. Clay Holmes is struggling. He's struggling mightily, and it's very possible that the Yankees right now, they're in last place. If they're in last place and they need to change something up, Michael King, he has shown even before he had the Tommy John surgery that he pitches very well, and his ratios are great, and he's available in most leagues as well. Also, Jose Siri, a lot of people dropped him this past week, but Manny Margot is not really hitting that much either right now. So Jose Siri is going to get some playing time. The Rays are very high on him. They're a very good team. He's only owned in 16% of CBS leagues. Remember, he was this opening day outfielder for the Tampa Bay Rays before he got hurt. So his value may have gone up, but then gone back down. Now's to buy in the downslide.
I just want to make the point that the Rays for a lot of years played Kevin Kiermaier in center field just for the glove. Siri has fantastic defensive numbers, so he's got an edge with an organization and a manager who likes to get max defense on the field. So even if, I think he's got an edge over Margot, and I mean, Josh Lowe's been great, but they've even kind of platooned him a little bit. So I think Siri is a safer bet because he has the high floor from playing time because of the defense. I love that pick.
Yeah, great for Roto. Does a little bit of everything. You did mention the Yankees going to King. It's a bad sign for the Yankees because if the Yankees were feeling like they were doing well, they're up in the division, then they would give time for Holmes to figure it out. But they just don't have the time to do that. And Michael King has been the better pitcher this year. 20 strikeouts in 17 innings, 1.56 ERA, 110 WHIP. 2 saves on the year, and they're just going to give over the reins to him because they just don't have time to let Holmes figure it out. Maybe he comes back and gets a save share later, but for now it's King. And, just to go on the closers topic, because I think it's a good week for closers if you need him. Will Smith on the Astros, the pitcher, he named the closer. He's only owned in 50% of CBS leagues. If you have Leclerc, you should be picking up Will Smith to back him up right away. I'll mention a few other closer situations. Alex Lang is 45% owned. He's the Detroit closer. Detroit, obviously not a great team getting a save, but he's the guy. He's been the best pitcher in the bullpen. He's the guy. Jahiris Familia, ex-Met, he was dropped by the Oakland Athletics. You know you're pretty bad when the Oakland Athletics drop you with their 9 ERA. So you can get rid of Familia. Zach Jackson is probably going to be the guy. This is a situation that if you're in a deep AL-only league, maybe. Otherwise, I wouldn't touch any Oakland A's pitcher, especially reliever. I do want to mention another reliever, Yennier Cano, 20% owned. And I mentioned Brian Abreu the other week. I love these relievers who look so fantastic. Doesn't matter if they get saves or not. They can vulture wins. What do you think Cano just did today? He vultured a win. And if you have Bautista, he's the backup closer. 2 saves, 13 strikeouts so far, 0 ERA, 0.08 WHIP. No, not 0.8 WHIP, 0.08 WHIP. He has literally given up 1 hit. And that wasn't even a solid hit. The batter literally chopped it up and down. It bounced right over the pitcher, and they threw and it just missed him. That's literally the only hit or walk he's given up. This guy looks really good.
He gave up a second hit today that was just as weak. Bobby Witt took a 2-strike swing, just kind of poked a 17 hopper through the right side. Cano now 9 innings, 2 weak base hits, and a hit batsman. I actually got him in tout and missed on a tie. We both had a $1 bid. I lost on the tiebreaker, and I lost Michael King and Cano that way last week in mixed waivers. So the perils. I'm not used to being in third place. I'm used to be getting anybody I want because I win all the tiebreakers. It's very strange being high in the standings. I want to mention 2 other relievers, more deep league plays, spec plays. Fans might have saw Giovanni Gallegos get knocked around by the Angels in the 9th inning the other night. Ryan Helsley pitched the 7th. It's unclear what they're going to do with their bullpen. Everybody's getting knocked around right now. But the one guy who isn't is Jordan Hicks. Jordan Hicks, who throws 173 miles an hour and has never actually been a good pitcher. Last week or so, 4 2/3 shutout innings. I believe it's 11 strikeouts. So of the 14 outs he's gotten 11 of them on strikeouts. Just somebody to keep in mind in the sense because the raw stuff has always been there, and if they shake that bullpen up, he's got a chance to get saves. And then in Cincinnati, Lucas Sims, who looked like he was going to be their closer a few years back, has suffered a couple of injury-plagued years. They've got Alexis Diaz and really no other good relievers. So on days that Diaz is unavailable, or if Diaz were to slip a little bit, I could see Sims stepping in and getting double-digit saves the rest of the way.
Yeah, and they're free, or essentially free now.
Yep.
You don't want to pay 30% of your FAAB next week, right? I certainly don't want you to do that. You could get them for literally 1% right now.
And if you want to take an Oakland closer, Trevor May is actually on a rehab assignment right now. He's probably the most experienced guy when he comes back in that bullpen, so he may end up being the closer. He's only 5% owned in CBS if you want to take that risk.
I think he's getting paid more than every other pitcher on the staff combined.
Yes,
he is.
Yes, he is. Friend of the podcast. He was on our show a couple years ago. Ruben, any other players to mention? There's a couple of batters I'd like to, but go first if you have any.
For batters, I think that's just about it. I'm not really keen on the batters. I think, like you mentioned, this is the week for relievers. A lot of closers, when April ends. This is when a lot of the closers start losing their jobs, and there's a lot of turnover. So if it's up to me, I'm spending all my money on closers this week.
So, just a couple of quick batters to mention. Nick Senzel, he's always been touted. He's good. Homers, he has steals, he has a little bit of everything, good average. He's just never healthy. Well, he's healthy now, and he has outfield eligibility, and he's playing third base right now, so he's probably going to pick up third base eligibility. Couple of homers this week. Good pickup in a little bit more shallow leagues. In deep leagues he should be owned, but even in some shallow leagues, I'd recommend him. Lamonte Wade, or Lamont Wade actually. He's 20% owned on CBS. He's heating up. I know the Giants platoon players, but he's starting to play even against the left-handers, so it's a good sign for him to get at bats. And of course, if there's a right-handed pitching heavy week against the Giants, you definitely want to play him. You should be aware of a couple of prospects. Gavin Stone came up, didn't have a great outing this past week, but very, very high upside. Again, he's one of the pitchers I dubbed this year as a potential this year's Spencer Strider. Not that there has to be a Spencer Strider for this year, but he could be there. And two hitters, Matt Mervis. We've seen him in the AFL. He pitched for Team Israel. Heck, he was on our show earlier this year. I think this guy has totally maxed out the minor leagues. He could be up for good. Hopefully he's up for good for his sake. You should be aware of him, and he's an instant pickup. And take a look at Christian Encarnacion Strand. We mentioned Nick Senzel. Well, I'm sure he'll get hurt, right? If he does, then this guy could be up. He's batting over 400 in the minors. He's got 6 homers in his first 10 games, including 2 today, a 208 WRC plus in the minors. This guy looks ready to go. Get him on your rosters before he's called up. He could be free in your league. It's possible. All right. Let's talk some pitchers in our pitcher preview. Joe, who's a possible 2-start or one good 1-start matchup for this coming week?
Oh, man, you guys, I got burned by him the other day. Because Skip Schumacher just decided to leave him out there. But Braxton Garrett, to me, has a really good 2-step next week. He goes Monday at the Diamondbacks. He goes Sunday at the Reds. At home against the Reds, which is about as good as matchup as you're going to get, even if Christian Encarnacion Strand is up at that point. Garrett had really pitched well up until that horrible start against the Braves on Wednesday night. And I think he's really coming into his own as that team's true number 3 starter. So I think that he might be available in some more shallower leagues, and that 2-step next week looks really tasty to me.
Move in.
I have 2 actually. I have a few. I have 3 actually. There's no 2-star pitchers. I try to stay away from 2-star pitchers at this point, but there are a couple that I do like, and one of them is Josiah Gray of Nationals. He's a little bit shallower leagues. He's 52% owned in CBS, but he's got a start this week at San Francisco against Sean Manaea, and Josiah Gray has actually been pitching pretty well. He has a 1.06 ERA in his last 3 starts with 18 strikeouts. I like that, and the way San Francisco is right now, I think that's a good play, especially because it's at San Francisco. So that's, I think it's a. You may not get the win because it is the Nationals, but still, you never know. Another one, Johnny Brito. Everyone wanted him very early on. He pitched very well for the Yankees, but now a lot of people dropped him because he had a couple of blow-ups. But this week, he's playing the A's at Yankee Stadium. I like that matchup. He's only 26% owned, so he's a guy you can get. And another guy, this is in much, much deeper leagues, and you want to take a guy for $1 and hope and pray for the best. Forrest Whitley. He's in the minors right now, but look at the Astros starting rotation. Can you name the 5 starters right now? Can anyone here name the 5 starting pitchers for the Astros right now? You got.
I can, but I'm looking at the page.
You got Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, Hunter Brown, and then 2 question marks because you have to remember Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy are on the IL. So Forrest Whitley, he's healthy. He's actually pitching pretty decently in the minors. He's only 9% owned in CBS, and you want to take $1 on him? Very few people are going after him. He's a guy that they may give him a chance this year.
Ruven, you've been talking about Forrest Whitley for a very long time. Hope
usually on the injury aspect. He's healthy.
Yeah. I'll mention one name. This is for deep leagues. Louis Varland. He's pitching for Minnesota. Minnesota has been great this year. I like what they're doing with the pitching. Hopefully it rubs off. A lot of strikeouts, 30% strikeout rate. His numbers have not been great, but look at those underlying things. 15% swinging strike rate. He's been unlucky, 346 BABIP. The left on base percentage is like in the 80s. So this is a deep play. He's 2 starts. So you might get something out of it. I mean, he's striking out. I mean, a 2-start step for him could be 14 strikeouts for the week. That's what he's done so far. So in leagues where your ERA is in okay shape, you can take a little bit of a hit, or a very deep league, Louis Varland is interesting to me.
Eno Saris' Stuff Plus model, Varland was really popping in that. A couple of days ago, he posted that. So there's some skills backing for some of the numbers he's putting up. I actually had him on the list. I want to throw out one more name here. You got to hold your nose for this one, though. So far this year, the Brewers have been absolutely horrible against left-handed pitching. That continued in Colorado, of all places, this week. They go to Kansas City. They're at home for Kansas City later in the week. Ryan Yarbrough, who threw 3 shutout innings before falling apart against the Orioles. At this point, you pretty much have to start any lefty against the Brewers, even Ryan Yarbrough. So again, deep league, again, like a $1 pull in a league. Take a shot with Ryan Yarbrough next Friday against the Brewers.
All right, that's our pitcher preview. Time for Ruvain's injury update. Hit it.
We'll start with the pitcher. We'll start with Kyle Wright. Kyle Wright was placed on the IL for right shoulder inflammation. This is his second trip on the IL this year for a shoulder issue. Dylan Dodd was called up, but you have to keep in the back of your mind, another guy you may want to think about is Mike Soroka. He is in the minors. If Dylan Dodd doesn't pitch well, you got Mike Soroka right there. Update on Jose Altuve. He's actually rehabbing pretty well. He's fielding grounders already. He's testing his grip in his bat, but he hasn't been cleared to swing yet. He said the next 2 weeks for his rehab are really important. It is possible he comes back earlier from the injury than anticipated.
It's
Jake
important
Berger,
for our teams, Ruvain. I think I own him on 5 out of 6 teams.
We have him on every single team, so I'm counting on the days when he comes back.
Yes.
Jake Berger, he's on the IL with a left oblique strain. We don't know how bad it is. This is the guy that everyone bet a lot of money on and tried to get in FAAB a couple weeks ago. Just because Moncada went down. He's now out, so there goes all the FAAB that people put into that. Hanser Alberto will probably get a lot of playing time, but I don't know if you really want to roster him. These 4 pitchers I'm going to end with, and these are the main starting pitchers that people are itching, wondering when they're going to come back. Brandon Woodruff, he's been on the IL. He was diagnosed with a subscapular strain of the right shoulder. The GM there said that his most recent MRI was, quote, very positive relative to what it could have been. His current target date for return is end of June. So you still got to go another full 2 months without Brandon Woodruff, so plan accordingly. Tyler Glasnow, he threw a bullpen session. He is going to be going possibly on a rehab assignment next week. He's a guy to watch for, and can you imagine the Rays getting any better? It's just crazy. Another pitcher, Carlos Rodon. The way it sounds like, I don't know when he's going to pitch. He had an forearm issue, then he has a back issue. He's going to see specialists to find exactly what's going on. There's something going on there. I don't know when he's going to pitch. If he's going to start ramping off, if he started ramping up now, you maybe get him back in mid to late June. There's a possibility he may be out to the All-Star break. I have no idea. No one knows exactly what's going on. He's a huge question mark. And of course, our old friend Jacob deGrom. He is on the IL with right elbow inflammation. He is scheduled to play catch this current road trip. He's eligible to return mid-May, and the Rangers are hopeful he will return that. But we have heard this story before.
Yeah, is anybody shocked about deGrom?
No. This is the risk. I mean, you guys are Mets fans. We don't have to ask you.
Yeah.
Hey, Ruvain, let me ask you, based on what you just said about Rodon, in a NFBC style league where you only have the seven reserve spots, no DL, is he droppable for you now?
He's close to droppable because how much value are you going to get out of him? You may get 2.5 months out of him. If you think you have someone on the waiver wire that will surpass that, or you have someone, or you're gonna find something better than him. If you need the roster spot, who's going to pick up Carlos Rodon next week? I don't think anyone's going to pick up Carlos Rodon next week. You can drop him, and you could probably pick up the following week for a couple bucks, because who's going to spend a lot of money on FAAB for Carlos Rodon at this point?
Yeah, Joe, in the NFBC, if you're playing and Rodon's on the wire, how much are you spending on him this week?
I'm not.
Right. So if you're not going to pick him up, then he's droppable. just pick him up next week for free, right? He's droppable now. You don't need that.
Or wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks until he's closer to returning. Then there's some risk you lose him that somebody else in your 12-team league decides, hey, I'm going to spend $1, I'm going to roster Rodon. But from what I understand, the roster spots are just so incredibly valuable without DL spots that it's if you're carrying a 0 week after week, it kills you.
Well, that's what happened to us last year. Someone in our NFPC league dropped Salvador Perez, and we're like, he's sitting out there, and we're thinking no one is going to spend on him. This was like around end of May, beginning of June. No one's going to spend on him because they think he's going to come back in September. So I think we bid like $2 on him, and we got him, and he came back early, and talk about return on investment. He had a great September. So it's a matter of when you want to drop these guys. If you think it's worthwhile, if you're going to get them if someone's going to pick up them next week, and if they're going to get picked up next week, then it's basically you have to hold on to them and waste a roster spot.
It also depends on your situation, because if you're a team that's in 15th place right now and you see Rodon on the waiver wire, you might say, well, I'm not going to get good just all of a sudden. I might as well go for it, and sure, let's just roster Rodon right now. If you're in first place and you need to churn and just need that production, then he doesn't fit your roster, right? It's a matter of risk and where you are in the standings as well.
That's true.
All right. Well, that's the end of our show. It was a good one. A lot of good strategy, a lot of interesting takes. Joe obviously knows his baseball, very articulate, and very much enjoyed having you on the show. Joe, can you just tell the audience where we can all follow and read your work?
Most of my work now goes into the Joe Sheehan baseball newsletter, which will turn 13 in a couple of weeks. I'm very excited about that. Just what I need, 2 teenagers now. I've got a 13-year-old daughter and I've got a 13-year-old son with the newsletter. But people can check that out at joesheehan.com. There's excerpts of everything I do. There's occasional free pieces. There's actually a page that has a lot of old free pieces from the past you can check out. It is a subscription product. It was one of the first subscription baseball newsletters out there. So you can check that out. There's an email link on joesheehan.com. Send me an email. Let me know you heard me on Beat the Shift. I'm happy to send you a couple copies, and you can see what it's about. But joesheehan.com. I'm also on Twitter, although I'm trying not to be, at Joe_Sheehan.
All right, check that out. And Ruven, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates, next man up, that sort of stuff. I also have a weekly article for Rotoball that comes out over the weekend to help you prepare for FAAB on Sunday.
And I'm Ariel Cohen. You can see my stuff over at Fangraphs, over at Rotoballer. The ATC projections are live rest of season now. And, of course, follow me on Twitter at ATCNY and listen to me right here on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. All right, once again, thank you so much to Joe Sheehan for coming on the show. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.